The first demonstration I saw in Houston that fall was at U of H, and it was for Lee Otis Johnson, who had been a community leader that the police framed up. I think, what did he do? He called Houston's, Mayor Louis Welch, Houston's little Hitler.
Yeah,
so then they planted a joint on him and gave him 30. Half a joint, and gave him 30 or 40 years.
They gave him
50 years.
50 years?
Yeah. And what did he do, 30? I think he did 30.
He came out.
He eventually, because Bobby Caldwell eventually got him out. I don't think he did 30, because he was out, when he got out, we were trying to recruit him. But, he was through
He
with
wasn't
politics.
the same.
Yeah, he was through with politics.
He had gotten a little off in prison. They put him through holy hell.
Yeah.
I used to visit him at the Ellishin.
He got out in the 70s. I don't know what time.
Late 70s, I
Yeah, because it was after I
They'd
moved
have him
to-
standing up all night and all day counting peanuts or keeping his nose on a wall.
Political prisoners.
Horrible shit. But anyway, I wanted to say something about MAYO, because I think that was a very important part of Houston. And they were very active. They were based in the north side, the very near north side of Houston. And that they had 2 or 3 different offices over the years there. They would do very creative things. They were working with some people at the Clayton Homes housing project whose apartments were just being run over by these roaches. So they helped people collect big jars of roaches. And we went to city, I'd never even seen a roach till I moved to Houston. I was like freaked out. But we went to city council and spoke, and we demanded that the city of Houston, or they demanded the city of Houston clean up these apartments, and they let all these roaches go at city council. That was so fun. But they were always doing very creative things, and they had very young people and elderly people. She's dead now, but a woman named Juanita Navarro was one of the big leaders. And I thought she was old, but I was in my 20s. She must have probably been my age. So they existed, I don't know. I met MAYO because the first year I taught school, I became friends with the mom of one of my students, and she introduced me to her grandmother who lived at Irvington Village Housing Project, and I guess she spent a lot of time there. And so she told me, these Chicanos are occupying this church in Northside. I'd like to meet them, but I'm kind of scared. I said, I'll go with you. So we went up there to meet them, and this guy, they had taken over a Presbyterian church right across the street from Moody Park, that the white people had left, and the church was just sitting vacant. So they decided to break in, and in the spirit of the Black Panther Party, they started a free breakfast program. They had stuff for senior citizens. They had free clothes. So the night that Norma Trevino, that was her name, the night she and I went over there, this guy opened the door, and he had a cane, and he welcomed us to come in and told us a little bit. And I remember telling Norma, I said, that guy's so cute. Too bad he's disabled. He's walking around with a cane. Come to find out that the cane was filled with steel. It was a weapon of self-defense, really, and he wasn't handicapped. That was the man I wound up being married to for 10 years. So, to the day they died, my parents still think we met in church.
Well, actually you did.
We did. But they didn't know the whole story. But anyway, MAYO was a very important part of Houston's history of the 70s. And before Carl was killed, there was a warrant out for his arrest. I can't remember the bullshit. For selling the paper. I don't know. Well, he and a cop had a standoff with
He
gun.
pulled a gun on I think he pulled a gun on a
cop.
but the
But
cop pulled a gun on him.
right, and Carl pulled his out. And so then they issued a warrant for his arrest. So for a week or two, people were there was a number of empty shops on Dowling Street, and we would spend the whole night down there with guns just waiting for the police to do something because we knew they wanted to kill Carl. And I don't think I'd ever held a gun in my life, and I didn't know if I was more afraid of the rats running around this empty building or the cops that could come. And
The cops were scarier.
yeah, and then the day that Carl was killed was the day that none of the John Brown people or the MAYO people were down there because there was a Chicano moratorium against the Vietnam War that day. So we were all out at Hidalgo Park on the east side and came home tired and sunburned. It was July 26th, hot as hell, and took showers and went to bed. And about, I don't know, 11 o'clock or something, we got a phone call that Carl had been shot. We tried to get down there, and oh my God, the whole area was just an army of police.
And you know, it was so strange because that morning, that evening, I told Carl I was up in the headquarters with Carl, and I had such a bad feeling. You know how you have like a feeling? And I really thought it was my little girl, so I had to ask permission to leave at that time. And I asked Carl permission. I said, can I go home and check on my child? But actually it was him. So when I got home, laid down, woke up that morning, Carl was dead. I come back that next day trying to find him. Didn't nobody know where he was, they say. But then I found out went to the hospital, Riverside, to check on the other guy. But I actually felt that, but I thought it was my child. You know how you get this feeling something happened? And I asked his permission to leave. If I hadn't asked his permission to leave, I would have been there, which I wouldn't have minded. But it was just like my father had my child, and I always check on her every week. And I thought maybe that's what it was. But when I got there, laid down, cut the television on, he was dead.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like weird.
I'll never
to me.
forget that phone call that night. The two people that were shot by the cops, Johnny Coward and Marquis Hale, they tried the next summer, which would have been the summer of '71, they tried the white guy first, thinking that, well, the Panthers aren't going to support him, but they did. And he had a trial, and he was accused of being out in the streets, shooting the cops on top of the St. John's Church, which he probably was, who knows. And to this day, he still has a bullet in his arm. Unfortunately, he turned into a right-wing ring.
He's a Republican.
Huh?
He's a Republican.
He was head of youth for Reagan back in the day. I don't know if he had a lobotomy or what. But anyway, his trial lasted about a week, and he got off on a hung jury. I don't know if people know who Mickey Leland was. He eventually became a U.S. congressperson, but he was a radical back in the day. I remember going to his house and watching films about Fred Hampton in his apartment. But Mickey was one of the people that testified because he went down there that night and got arrested. And he told about how he was treated in the jail. And I was watching the jury, and this one girl looked really disturbed when Mickey was talking about what had happened. She, along with some other people, hung up the jury. It turned out she was white, but her husband was black, and she told me, all I could think of is that could have been my husband, treated like Mickey was treated at the jail. So it was a hung jury. They never retried him, and they didn't even try Johnny Coward. So that was a small victory that came out of Carl's death.
Yeah, he worked with Carl on the Operation Breadbasket, Mickey Leland.
Right.
So can we back up and talk about the assassination of Carl Hampton? I'm not sure where you all would want to start with that.
Neither one of us was there. I had just left that evening. Like I said, I thought it was my daughter. I had a bad feeling, but it was Carl. But I know before then, Carl was in the office. He was saying he didn't have any sandbags in that place, and he was saying, you know, I need to put sandbags around here. And I said, oh, okay. And then I noticed that police was just constantly going up and down the street, and that's about the only thing I could tell you about it. You know, they have more of us that just didn't show up today that could give you more information on it. But like I said, I had left that evening thinking that it was my daughter, but it was actually Carl. The next day they killed.
Somebody
It
had
was,
shouted, oh, go ahead.
Well, see, it was one of the comrades was selling a newspaper, and the police were harassing him, and Carl pulled up. And so Carl got out the car and he, walked over, asked him what was the problem. So the police, Carl had a 45 strapped to his chest. So the police asked him what he was doing with that gun. And Carl told him that wasn't none of his business. He had a right to bear arms. So the police started walking toward him, and Carl told him, "Don't come no closer." And so the police went for his gun, and Carl went for his, and Carl outdrew him. And so they called for backup. Police called for backup. Carl and them they backed up into the office. This happened right at the office on the corner of McGowan and Dowling. And but see, what shocked the police, all these people started coming. And they started standing in front of us and said, "Y'all not gonna do nothing to them." So as Gloria was saying, for about a week, that whole block, probably from Elgin on back down Dowling, it was no police. It was nothing party members and supporters. People came from all over the city. Black people came from all over the city, and some white people, and but brought their guns with them. And Duncan Tail came from Sunnyside, and people came from Pleasantville and Clinton Park. So about a week, you didn't see any police around there. And so what the police did on the night Carl was killed, it was all set up. They had busloads of police blocks away, and they sent 3 snipers and a reporter, newspaper reporter, up on the roof of this church. St. John's Church is the highest point in that area, and the reason the reporter was up there was to identify Carl, because he had interviewed Carl about 3 days before all this went down. And so these young ladies came down. Carl was speaking at the park, Emancipation Park. These young ladies came down, and they told him there was some white men up on the roof of the church. So Carl and Barty went down there to see what was going on. Carl did have an M1 carbine with him. Barty had a weapon with him, but there was a record. The whole thing was recorded. And on the recording, you could hear when Carl got ready to cross the street, you could hear the report. So there he is right there. That's him right there. And then you hear all these shots going on. And one of the police said, "Okay, did we get him?" And the other one said, "Yeah, we got that nigga. We got him." And there was a brave young lady in a Volkswagen, drove up and put Carl in the car.
Named Sophie.
Yeah, and took him to the hospital, but he died. Died from his gunshot wounds. But and then, like I said, they had busloads of police all over. They blocked the whole area off. They just came in. It was hundreds of police just blocked the whole area off. And for what I understand, they had been trained by the tactical police from New Orleans, because police from New Orleans had raided the Panther office there maybe a year before. Because really, the first, and this is not in LA, but the first SWAT was set up for the Black Panther Party.
Whoa,
The first use of SWAT was in LA, 41st and Central, and but then it spread across the country as well, trained and stuff. So.
One of the people I met, have y'all ever heard of Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz? She's written, she's a native woman from Oklahoma. She's written a lot of, she actually has a brand new book out on the Second Amendment. She was living in New Orleans, but I met her recently. She's, I don't know why we didn't meet around People's Party too. I was down there. And I said, well, there was a lot of people down there.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of people around there too, but I didn't know exactly, what they was up to. I knew that they was a protect Carl.
Right.
But I don't remember them every day like that, but they were there.
I remember trying to teach school after being up all night, looking for cops, watching out for the rats. But,
So
They don't make teachers like that anymore.
they don't make what?
They don't make teachers like that anymore.
It's amazing I never got fired. Well, they
Yeah, they
tried.
did say it was a special task force that they put together for People's Party in Panthers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then one we had here also was it was called CID, which is the Central Intelligence Division of the Houston Police Department. That was their main job, you know. And then you had a squad of police that was their main job, was just to fuck with us. And I was talking to James about the other when it was two white cops, Bingle and Stewart, and they were just, that's all they did. They was just around the office, and I mean, it was like.
They were saying the same cop that said the police that the TSU-5 shot first was the same one that said Carl shot first.
Oh,
Same one.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said
That's
Carl
what
was
they
shot.
but the CID still exists.
Yeah, it still
The
exists.
Criminal Intelligence
Well, just
Division.
like SWAT still exists.
Oh.
I mean, that was their main job was.
Well, you know, it's really gotten because just I guess until the end of the Obama administration, all of these police departments were getting all of this military equipment.
Equipment, yeah.
And they
So-called surplus.
surplus. And so they are, you know, they're more better armed, and of course they were frightened because the people had moved to protect Carl. So that's why they came and
After Sandra Bland was killed, that was it Waller County Police had like these green,
yeah.
I don't know what the hell they were. They looked like
These
tanks or
vehicles, yeah, I mean
some kind of equipment that they got.
Yeah, armored vehicles.
Yeah, armored vehicles, that's what it was. They had two of them sitting out there, and I'm like, for Waller County?
And so, you know, your Second Amendment lets you shoot at tanks.
Well, when they executed Shaka Sankofa, there was tanks on the streets of Huntsville. I looked down that street and I'm like, oh my God, there's a war.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, overkill.
right.
Yeah.
So maybe we could take a break in like 15 minutes, but do y'all want to mention Prairie Fire, talk about Prairie Fire? Or at least what it is, because a lot of people don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, the white people that I worked with in the early 70s were in John Brown Revolutionary League. Prairie Fire, I guess, came a little later, and I think it was an all-white group, radical group. It was a national group, whereas John Brown was just a local group. I'm sorry Johnny Herrera isn't here, but I don't know what all to say about Prairie Fire.
What was your address? Because, you know, when I was up in North Texas, but whenever I came to Houston, I would always go to the bookstore. And the Prairie Fire bookstore.
Prairie Fire bookstore, that's
It was
right.
off of Main Street, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was on Main Street. Yeah, it was. And it was always a lot of. Well, the information was just incredible.
Well, that's where Walter Burwell shot a Klansman at that bookstore. Some Klansmen came in and they were having a meeting. And Walter got up and said, "You're going to have to leave." And he said, "Yeah, you're going to make me?" He said, "Yeah." Pulled out his gun and shot him. He just died last week. Good old Walter. But you know, it was, I think in recent years, probably since Occupy maybe, there's been an upsurge of activism in this country. But during the 80s and 90s, you know, Reagan was elected and it was kind of a down period for the movement, any working class organizations in general. And I always felt kind of bad that people that were coming up and wanting to be active in the 80s and 90s, it was tough. Now I think we're seeing a flurry of activism. Of course, Trump is
the seeds are being laid for it. You know, the seeds are being laid for it because this government wants to be very, very obvious with their repression and is forcing people to look at what's happening. But one of the things about it is activism is really it's reactivism, and we don't do enough for ourselves without being pushed.
Right. Well, the thing, I remember a few things about the 70s that I think were important. There was a whole fight by pro-choice people. Abortion was illegal until 73. And so that was a whole struggle. I remember speaking before the Harris County Commissioners, I think it was, or maybe some health board. And I was pregnant. I actually went and bought a maternity dress. I didn't own a dress. So I could go speak before these people as a pregnant woman who was demanding my right to have an abortion if I decided that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that was the whole struggle that happened in the 70s. The other thing was the Attica prison rebellion in 1971 in New York had repercussions down here among prisoners in Texas who kind of caught on fire and became active. And of course, a lot of people were arrested in the 70s, members of the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, Puerto Rican independence fighters, white anti-imperialist fighters, and many of them are still in prison today. But during the mid-70s, prisoners in Texas started thinking, we need to do something. You know, if Attica can have this rebellion, then we got to do something here. And about 7 prisoners had filed suits against the prison system. And in 1977 or 78, I can't remember, David Ruiz, a Chicano prisoner from Austin, had written up a suit, and he waited till he could get into a prison in East Texas to file his, because there was one decent federal judge, ironically named Judge Justice.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was, you know, like crossing his fingers that his case would get assigned to Judge Justice's court, and it did. And so what Judge Justice did was took all of these suits and made a class action out of them. And I think it was 77, I don't know, it was a while back. So we had a group back then called the Prisoner Solidarity Committee that we formed after demonstrating outside the prison rodeo in Huntsville in 1970. We had members of Workers' World who had been in prison with David and knew him. And so we started building for this trial. And when the trial started downtown at the old Federal Building, there was about 100 of us outside with signs and this and that. And then we all went upstairs for the trial. So this attorney for the state of Eddie Darr, he was one of the attorneys for the state of Texas, stood up and he goes, Your Honor, before I begin, I think that you need to decide that this is going to be tried in this courtroom and not downstairs on the sidewalk. And the judge looked at him and he said, the trial will be tried here, but we have a constitution that protects the people on the sidewalk to do just what they were doing this morning. And if you have to walk through them and I have to walk through them, so be it. And that, at the time, I don't know if it still is, but at the time it was the longest civil trial in the history of the United States. It went on for a year. And I got to sit through a lot of it, and then I wound up having to take clean clothes to the county jail for guys who were going to testify. But there was over 100 prisoners that testified, and eventually won, and declared the prison system unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing that happened was when the trial ended, the judge gave all the prisoners that testified the right to go to a federal prison because he knew there was going to be retaliation. Yeah. Well, all of them did except for 10. All 10 of them wound up dead within a few years. They got cancer, they got this, they got that. They were really just friggin' murdered by the prison system. But fortunately, I can't remember if it was 100 or 200 prisoners that testified, a lot. Fortunately, the vast majority are alive today, or were alive, lived through their prison sentence. Two other things I want to just mention quickly. In 1970s, the gay movement was kind of in an embryonic stage. I mean,
Yeah.
well, Stonewall had been 69, the Stonewall Rebellion in New York.
New York.
And, but Anita Bryant, who was, what was she, a singer
was,
and an
uh,
actress? And
She was
Yeah, she was
Miss America. She was
yeah.
was she Miss America?
I don't know, but did she actually win Miss America? I know that she was a beauty queen.
or whatever.
Yeah.
She was the spokesperson for Florida Orange.
For the Orange
Yeah.
Juice.
Yeah.
So somebody in Houston brought her to speak. Oh my God, this was, I don't know, I think in the late 70s. I had never seen such a big demonstration. In fact, I never found the people I was supposed to meet down there. There was like 9,000 or 10,000 people downtown. And, you know, we thought there'd be a few hundred people, whatever. It was amazing. And that was really what lit the fire that became
Yeah, she was real anti-gay.
Yes.
And
Oh yeah,
she
she was.
She
set
it
it
off.
as an actress, spokesperson, all that. As a, you know, she's a preacher, like speak. That's like when you're saying she came here to speak, and that happened.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool thing that happened. And in 1977, I think it was the United Nations declared it the Year of the Woman or something. So there was this huge international women's conference in Houston at the old Albert Thomas Convention Center, where the Sundance Theater and all those restaurants and stuff are. There used to be a convention center there. So I was part of a group that organized a radical women's contingent. And so, I mean, we had lit tables inside and so on. It was a good convention, but not radical or revolutionary. So we had a rally one day right across the street, and while we were rallying, here come the friggin' Klan marching up on the convention center. So we said, oh no, they're not going in there. So we told, I don't know who was on the mic, if I was or somebody else, we said, we're gonna go, and they had a banner, like, they misspelled dykes. I mean, they were just so stupid. So we stopped them from entering the Albert Thomas Convention Center. Me and somebody else wrapped a couple of them in their own banner, so they couldn't even move. It was a pretty interesting day for Houston. The Brown Beret women from San Antonio were with us. I can't remember who else, really. But before the convention, we had heard they were going to do something. So me and another woman went to and this was 77, so I was quite a bit younger. We went to the Klan bookstore and said we were students at U of H and we were assigned to do a report on their bookstore or something stupid. And they talked to us and we asked a lot of questions. And then I think they finally realized they're asking too many questions. So then they started telling us how they had dogs that were trained to attack on command. Then they brought in their dogs. And I told the other woman, I said, let's get the fuck out of here. I'm scared of dogs. But they made a point of talking about their training camps to teach weapons and their dogs and their philosophy. So when they came to that conference, we were ready to kick ass, and we did. Do we have time for me to say one more thing?
Well, I was gonna say if y'all want to take a break and
Okay.
then come back in 15 minutes, how are y'all feeling about that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.